Oh,
They wanted to go to it before.
it's there, yeah.
They wanted to go to it before COVID and they never got to go to it, so.
Oh, yeah.
He hasn't gone on vacation for 7 years.
That's not good for a person.
No, it's not.
For sure with 4 small kids.
Yeah.
You know, something goes.
I went.
I'll go.
Oh, that's that. Understandable.
He got married a few months.
Oh,
His wife was from.
I think I was in Montana with my kids passing through. 98.
Yeah. It's a while ago.
That's, yeah.
Okay, well, let's go ahead. We'll call our meeting to order here. This is the April 10th, 2023 Personnel Committee meeting, and it is 5:30. And we have a couple items here for positions. And the first one is our Municipal Field Event Coordinator. Take it away, Mike.
All right.
Oh,
So a couple of weeks ago or so, Bruce Steinbecker, who is the varsity baseball coach, contacted me and indicated that last summer, well, he called it a contract, but I would say it's more of a job description that he did. And it was a pilot program that the district initiated, taking care of the field during the summer, you know, all the stuff that goes with the mowing, lining of the field, dragging the infield, taking care of the pitcher mound, all that kind of stuff that goes with a baseball diamond, trim around the fences, and so forth and so on. And I included with this agenda item what he has sent me, and so I contacted Stan Dietrich, the athletic director, and said, "Hey, Stan, talk to me about this." And Stan represented that, hey, that was money well spent last year. He says, I would encourage the district to do it again this summer. And so from that conversation, it went into, so do you see this as an ongoing thing, Stan, or do you see this as just summer by summer? And he said, well, as long as we are, I don't know if we own the field or I don't know that sort of arrangement, I'm sorry, but he said, as long as we have this field, it would be in our best interest to maintain it, be in our best interest to get involved with scheduling and overseeing it. He said, I would think that as long as we have this arrangement with the field, that this would be an ongoing stipend. Then I also asked him about the because there's also I think it's a summer school help type thing, summer school student type help. And I don't know, it was like $11 an hour. I said, so talk to me about that, because that looks like it's an additional 40 hours. And what he said was, he said, Mike, depending on the circumstances and the usage of the field, that position can be totally allocated to the field for a week or so. And then there's other times where it slows down a little bit, or we get a dry spell and we don't have to mow as much. And that person then is given other assignments throughout the district relative to mowing and trimming and et cetera, et cetera. So I guess what I would recommend is that we do continue with the stipend, and I would also recommend that we make it an ongoing stipend. The question surfaced as to, where is this in the budget? I did talk to Angela, and Angela said that we have a stipend, total pool of dollars for stipends for extracurriculars, and this would just come out of that type of stipend pool, which is sufficient to cover that on an annual basis. So I would recommend that we do it.
Okay.
All right, do we have a motion and a second to approve I'm gonna call it a permanent municipal field event coordinator stipend?
I can make a motion to open it up for discussion.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'm sure. I'll say.
Okay,
I guess that's
all right,
all that's
all right.
Yeah.
Any discussion at all about this?
Who allocates the funds, or is there a position, or is it just a stipend that gets paid? How do they record their hours?
Yeah, who's this going through? Yeah.
Is it
Yeah,
one
my
of the
question.
athletic budget?
No, I'm saying who's the overseer of it? Is it you, Mike, or?
I think the overseer would end up being our ultimately Stan Dietrich, our athletic director would oversee that and make sure that, of course, that field is being well maintained and taken care of and the scheduling is being taken care of. So I believe Stan would be the person.
So he's responsible for distributing the funds that we approve through the stipend in any way that he sees fit, or can you explain
He would-
that?
To my knowledge, what would happen is that the stipend is, I think, $3,000 and it's about an 8-week position. So just, right there, you can do a little bit of math. But what would happen is if indeed the personnel committee advances it on to the full board for approval in 2 weeks and it does get approved, then it would go through the business office relative to a stipend to come out of the stipend pool. And it would go on our spreadsheet as a permanent position year after year ongoing, as long as we have that field arrangement.
And it is an 8-week position?
I believe it's an 8-week position. It should say, just a second, let me just pull it up here.
It's August 6th.
Yeah, June 13th through August 26th. So
That's what it says.
that's pretty, I think that's June 13th, July 13th, August. So it'd be about 10 weeks then.
So the way that I understand it, Matthew, is that, so then Stan's responsible for hiring somebody, putting forth somebody for that stipend. And they, I don't believe it's logging your hours. You just get that stipend, very similar to what we do with coaches. And so, there, typically who's ever signing the contracts, well, it's the board president will see all those stipends that come through, and you'll also see them on the personnel report as well.
My question was, so it'll be Stan Dietrich's discretion, as long as what I'm trying to say is, hey, what if it's not just the head coach every year? Maybe it wants to be somebody else. Like, it's the discretion to do it, so it's not just the head coach, maybe an assistant coach wants to do it the next year, so
As
that's all
I'm
I'm saying.
reading down into the summer seasonal staff, it says student/college student would be hired.
Okay, thank you, sir.
That's an addition.
Right.
In addition of,
Right.
So,
There's, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
so Matthew, to answer your question is this. All extracurricular stipends are on an annual basis. They're not a contract, they're an agreement. And should the district, principal, athletic director, anybody think that, okay, this certain coach or this certain stipend, we're going to go in a different direction, on an annual basis, we can go into a different direction just by not offering the person another yearly agreement. Does that make sense?
yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Mhm.
My question was
It's a
answered.
permanent position, but
That
it's
makes-
not
that makes sense.
It's under the discretion of the athletic director to hire who needs to be hired. And it
Correct.
can be changed from year to year. That's what I want to make sure.
Yep. Yeah, it's not a guarantee that the
Yeah. They're not hiring an actual person.
head baseball
They're
coach
hiring-
will
Yeah,
get it,
it's
but
just a position. Real quick.
It's just a stipend for that position.
Got it.
And that I'm okay with.
so Mike, I mean, it's just opened another question for me though, like when we have a baseball coach or tennis coach, how does that, do we put that on WISE? What's the, I was,
Why staff?
yeah, do we put that on WeCan?
No. I mean, if indeed we have, I don't know, let's just talk about a football staff of eight coaches. And we want all 8 coaches to return because they did a good job. Stan feels really good about it. The head coach really feels good about his staff. Then basically we just offer those agreements. However, if indeed we have somebody that says, I'm not coming back next year, they resign, somebody retires from teaching and that opens a position, or if indeed we say, we're not offering an agreement to Mike Malt next year, then we would take those positions and post them internally to see if we have any interest within the district to do that, because our preference is to hire extracurricular coaches or our current staff is where we want to go first before we go outside the district for help.
Okay. Okay, well, any other further discussion about the municipal field event coordinator position for a stipend?
No.
All in favor of adding that stipend position? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, and then our second item we have here is looking over our school psychology services. And Mike, do you want to do that, or you want Katie to go ahead?
Well, I will defer to Katie. We'll let Katie
Okay.
run with that.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for the opportunity to present some information. I believe there's a lot link in your notes that links directly to the proposal that the school psychology team has worked on. To give you a little background information, we have had a 4-person school psychology team for the last 3 or 4 years. Prior to that, we were at a 3-person school psychology team. So we are slowly, the discussion around adding an additional member to their team has been in the works for quite some time. And Jamie has been very supportive in looking at our ratio numbers and knowing that we have a school psychology team right now that is primarily working on evaluating students for special education. That is because of the ratio of numbers. That is primarily the work that they do. So given their specialized training and their ability to help support students break down barriers as a result of mental health needs and those kinds of things, and support students on intervention teams and as part of conversations that connect families with resources in the community and support intervention groups at school, they're primarily testing students and progress monitoring students. So they did a great job of breaking down some area ratios. We look at total student enrollment divided by the number of school psychologists that districts have. So you can see currently with our 1,190 student to school psych ratio, we are at the top of the pack in some comparable data. Even with 5 school psychologists, we would be at 956 students per school psychologist, which again keeps us really at the top of the comparable list here in regard to the amount of students that our school psychs are potentially providing services for. So there's a little information there about some area comparables.
What were we last year? Right now we're at 1190, you said?
Our enrollment has declined a bit, so their ratio was even higher than that. We've been well over the 11, we've been about 1,200 students per school psychologist for the last few years.
But our enrollment declined, but their ratio was higher before, right?
Well, so it decreased this year a bit with our decline, our bit of a dip in enrollment. So it was higher last year when there were more students enrolled.
Correct.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
God,
I'm just wondering why they didn't bring it up when it was higher, now that it's getting less. They're, you know what I mean? That's just a question.
No, I understand what you mean. That's a very fair question. Like I said, I do believe there has been conversation. I know that this document they had originally was created in 1920. I don't know if there were, I don't know what the previous director did in regard to having these conversations with the board prior to me taking on this role. But I know that the school psychology team has been preparing data and information like this for the last few years. I think our strategic plan for me is making me feel like this is an appropriate time to look into this a little further. We have an 18% ratio of students with disabilities in our district right now. There will need to be some effort to look at dismissing some of those students who are no longer in need of services and really taking a good look at who continues to receive some special education services and who has developed the skills necessary to be more independent. So our school psychologists will need to participate on the testing and help support those dismissal conversations. So that is directly aligned to our strategic plan. And then supporting the mental health needs, growing their capacity to move beyond just assessors and progress monitors in our district and really be able to work with students and support building leadership teams to support any barriers to education that our students are experiencing. So it felt like this was a good time, knowing that their work is extensive. In addition to these students, we also support our school psychologists have to be a member of every team for our private school referrals. We've had more than 60 private school referrals this school year, and it takes on average about 8 to 10 hours per referral just for the observing and testing. And that's for students that aren't enrolled in our school district. So
Explain why we do that. I mean, I don't get that.
it's part of our collaborative agreement with our private school partners. So there's an obligation in the state of Wisconsin for child find. So if there is a question that a parent or an educator has in regard to a student's ability to meet grade level expectations, we have an obligation as the local public LEA to engage in that child find process and evaluate, assess, and conduct team
For
meetings.
private schools though, I don't quite understand. Is that a statutory request? It is. Okay.
And it's
So
becoming
that explains
increasingly
it, I
more
guess.
extensive.
But,
It's
you know, I'm stunned by this, as a matter of fact, because at the WASB convention in February, I went to a session on mental health, and honestly, you know better than I do, but it's epidemic. I mean, it's epidemic. The number of kids that are committing suicide, for example, the number of people that are not on just anxiety meds, but are, really dealing with depression. And we have this ratio. I mean, honestly, where the recommendation is 500, I mean, I can't imagine, one person having a responsibility for a load like that. I mean, Chippewa Falls and Verona are pretty high, but the fact of the matter is that Manitowoc is just, that's sort of an irresponsible position to be in, isn't it? I mean, when we really do have a kind of an epidemic going on, and these people are devoted mostly to evaluation.
with very specialized skills to be able to support students at a level that I think we need to your point right now.
Katie, how many positions, how many are you looking to add at this point?
Just one.
Just one.
So we would add a 5th member to our current team of 4.
Okay. And that would bring the ratio, would it get to that 500 to 1 or the 700 to 1?
It gets 956.
It would get
looks
to
like.
956. then.
956.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we would still be well over the NAS recommended model.
Yeah.
But this would allow, and there's on the 3rd page, they have, again, this psych team did an amazing job of compiling some information here. They created some various scenarios of building assignments that would it would take a 3rd building off of each of their plates, and it would allow for some more specialized programming. So there could be some more grade level consistency and give people the opportunity to support on part of 2 building leadership teams as opposed to 3, which is pretty stretched thin in a 5-day week.
I think that need is always there, but the reason why I asked the question before is because, like you said, our enrollment has gone down, so that's lightened a little bit. And then like our strategic plan is to evaluate those and lighten the load even more. So then once we do hire a 5th, and then we go through and evaluate, and obviously we're really hopeful to lighten the amount, to dismiss some of them that may not be needing or have graduated that need or whatever. What do we do at that point in time when it's less and less and less type thing? I mean, are we overshooting it now really quick, or is this something we should be kind of keeping an eye on before we jump the gun? That's the only reason why I asked.
That's a fair question. So our school psychologists really aren't involved in the special education process other than being the case manager of initial evaluations and supporting progress monitoring teams. So that need will never really go away. We will continue to have solutions teams through this new SFA model that will look at supporting students with their academic, social, emotional needs who are in need of intervention. So they will continue to be part of that process. Their initial evaluations may potentially not be as significant as they are right now. It's very difficult to predict that. But there will always be our child find obligation. So there will always be students that will need to be evaluated, and then, those that may need some additional testing to be dismissed. So it may kind of even out in the wash in regard, we may not have as many initials ideally, but we may have more testing than in the form of dismissal.
I mean, there's a guarantee that
Well, right, yeah.
Right.
continue to work. for
And this
sure.
will, and this
You know.
will allow them then to do more along their specialized training. So that this would give them the ability to support on leadership teams and not solely be progress monitoring and evaluating.
Well, I guess I'm not, I defer to a professional. What do you think? I mean, what do you think is your opinion anyway? I'd like to
Yeah.
know.
Sure, I don't mind giving it. I just wanted, does anyone else have?
I have a question.
Comments?
Is there any third-party services that are contracted out at this point, like CISA at all? Is there any options at all?
There typically wouldn't be, because sometimes there's school psychology services that are provided through CISA for districts that aren't large enough to employ their own. So we would, because we have our own school psychology staff members, or our own school psychologists here, we typically would contract out for additional outside services.
But there is services available?
I could look into it.
Okay, that's my question. Mike, do you have something to say?
Yeah. I've experienced where we've hired some contracted services in the past for the school district, and I have to tell you, expensive. I mean, super expensive per hour. So the bottom line there is, if we can hire our own, we get much better bang for the buck. And the other thing I want to point out is that we would have to drop 1,000 students to get into the 800s per school site. If you had 4,000 divided by 5 school sites, I think the math comes up to 800. And that's where the vast majority of the school districts are on that chart that Katie's provided. It's in the mid 800s. So obviously, it'd be a bad day if we dropped 1,000 students. No, that's not going to happen.
Okay, Jamie also has her hand raised.
My little tiny hand. So
Yes.
one of the reasons that this really popped up this year is that we did have a school psychologist on leave, reducing us down to 3. And the other thing that we're seeing is an increase in our private school evaluations. And we need to flip this model so that what we're looking at is a more proactive approach. And some of these folks are some of our highest skilled professionals within the district. So I do think by adding another member, we're going to have better retention of those that we have. We're going to be able to flip that model some so that we're more proactive, and then we'll be getting our evaluations done in a timely manner.
That's good.
Anybody else? Tony?
Is there any breakdown on, I'm just curious to know, like situations that would require the intervention of a psychologist in the normal course of the school day? Like, do we have any data that?
Because we have counselors.
I think, some of their specialized training is listed on some of the, on the second page, if you want to refer to some of those, but, there would be situations where we have a student or a group of students who are in a crisis mode, maybe requiring a skill set beyond that of our school counselors, who are dealing with more day-to-day maybe interpersonal conflict between students, or students that are working on more school functional social emotional skills, and not necessarily some more deeper level of trauma. Maybe a student who has expressed that they were considering suicide, so the school psychologist might make a regular appointment with that student to do check-ins, and they, just because of their specialized skill set, have the ability to do that. And our counselors deal with those things more on a initial basis, but this allows a deeper dive into some interventions for those students who might be more in crisis or more in a mental health crisis, for example.
Right. I guess to further expound on that, like, do we have any data on just the different percentages of
how they're spending their time.
Yeah, I just want to understand the magnitude of the issue. I mean, and again, maybe I'm just thinking about this the wrong way, but like maybe this is normal now, that schools just employ psychologists. It seems like that's the trend from the data you're sharing.
Yes, that for long periods of time for this, a school psychologist in a school, especially our size, school district our size, is not an uncommon position, and they've been part of that evaluation process.
Yeah.
Since really students with disabilities have been.
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious just to see like if there's anything, and I see kind of a broad range of things they might do, but if there's any data that we can get that just shows like kind of a X% is like this type of caseload. If it's like, what is it like? How many kids are talking about suicide, right? I mean, that's kind of a big deal, right? That we should know about. And then I just want to better understand it. If there's any more granular data.
Yeah, I can do that.
Mike, did you have something?
Well, I just want everybody to be well aware that finding a school psychologist is going to be fairly difficult. We may land on our feet and be excited, and we may not. They're hard to find. There's the need in the state of Wisconsin for school psychologists is substantial, and everybody's looking for them. We just got to see if we can attract somebody and bring them in and seal the deal and bring them in.
And just we really need two, where we would add one, but we need to fill the one that left.
Our one was out on a maternity leave this
got it.
year.
Okay.
And then we did not have any option to fill, just because of the shortage and the need all over the state. So then our three were taking on the roles and responsibilities of that individual for.
Got it. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
That just exacerbates my point, my thinking of, well, what's okay, I understand caseload, that's perfectly understandable, but are we servicing the kids right now? Or do we have a backload of special ed evaluations? Because that's where the root of this is coming from, special ed evaluations. And I know that there's got to be a uptick on evaluations in the beginning of the school year, and then there must taper off. So I would be curious to see the data of where we align, if it's the first 3 months of the school year that we have an uptick or that we need extra services. Maybe then we do need 5 psychologists. And then maybe after that, it tapers off. I'm very concerned about employing somebody all year if the caseload is so volatile, depending on the incoming school year. And then the initial evaluation is done. Then what are we getting the rest of the year? Or could we maintain the level of 3 or 4 after that point? That's my biggest concern at the moment.
Evaluations are ongoing throughout the year. They're typically the lowest at the beginning of the year because criteria for special education requires that teams engage in like 6 to 8 weeks of standard research-based interventions that require progress monitoring. So for every single evaluation that happens in our district, and I can get the number of evaluation data, we're over 100 for the year right now currently. But every school psychologist participates on an initial team where stakeholders talk about identify priority of need for the student, come up with a plan. What's the skill deficit? What is the intervention that we're going to implement? So if it's a reading disability or skill deficit, or a math disability or skill deficit, then our school psychologists will allow the determined interventionist to work their magic, and then they need to engage in ongoing progress monitoring on a weekly or bi-weekly basis for X amount of weeks in order to determine if that intervention is working. The intervention works, wonderful. We don't need to go to an evaluation. In the event that the intervention is not helping that student close their achievement gap or that skill gap in the moment, then we need to move forward with a special education evaluation. That system requires observation, testing, reporting, meeting with team members, and these are ongoing situations throughout the year. So,
with all the staff of the team, right? Not just the psychologist.
well, the school psychologist bears the case management load in any initial evaluation. So they are They are the coordinator of all of the stakeholders, do the testing, do the reporting out, the many page document that it analyzes all of the evaluation results and then makes recommendations.
The last question, I promised. So then I guess I'd be curious to see the data of what we did last year with the three, how many evaluations we completed. I think you said was over 100 this year already. And we have 3 employed right now. And then I'd like to see the last 3 years, how many evaluations we did with the 4.
Why? I mean, why so many good notes for this
I'm just
position?
asking.
Well,
questions.
You know, why?
It makes sense to me, and that's
Wrong.
why I'm kind of getting curious about it.
Well,
'cause
and
everything's
I think I can provide some foundation for this. And this is not as a psychologist, but this is as, I think we need to look at this. I don't mind adding one person to look at to do with evaluations. I think the issue here is, I think our district needs to decide whether or not we want to be providing mental health services within our district. Is a school district that focuses on education, and I'm not talking about the where we find that there's a barrier to that education, we provide those services like we're doing now, but I believe there's a push in this state, if not this country, to make schools have a whole mental health unit to help with kids. And it says right in here, in this description here is that they can be an exciting resource to the school community and development of effective mental health skills. School psychologists are trained to support, and having them in the school helps because the community doesn't have enough psychologists to go around.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And they're not very well covered by insurance either.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is what we've done in this state and in this country is let the school take care of it. Let the school take care of it. And we use our resources. We dwindle them down from what our mission is, which is what is education.
Yeah, I don't know how much we get reimbursed for this. I mean, I don't know if this is.
I think
We
that's the
don't
concern.
get reimbursed for this. This is out of our general budget.
Medicaid.
Well, and we can engage in some third-party billing for providing, so our special education team district-wide engages in third-party billing.
Okay, we do that now.
Yeah. So our school psychology team is allowed to bill for all evaluations and IEPs that they are a part of when the student qualifies. So we do receive some support from third-party billing to our district. But it's not a reimbursement of school-based mental health services. So, we have outside agencies that come into each of our buildings and provide school-based mental health services to students who are eligible to receive those services. So our school psychologists would support as interventionists. Really, they wouldn't be providing the same type of clinical psychological services that our school-based mental health.
Okay, and that's because that's not what it sounds like in here, which came from NASP. I'm not saying that, but I mean, do you see? And I'm not saying you, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I look at a school psychologist is they are exactly your description. They are the ones that are evaluating, they're monitoring, they are engaging with the teacher, the staff, how to develop programming for this. And I think if we move to this other, what Carrie's talking about, and I'm not saying that you said anything wrong, but that there are these diagnostic, all the anxiety, all the, we are going to have, and then where is the community's responsibility, and the private sector and the public sector with human resources to use their resources to also support, our students in the community. So I just, I think it's very easy for everybody to get, I always talk about being in your lane, right? I mean, I think we need to stay in our lane, and I'm not saying that we don't need more. To be truthful, I do psychological evaluations and I know what they're doing. It takes a lot of time. It is a lot of paperwork. especially because it's dictated by the state. And so it's like all these boxes across. So I would support adding another psychologist, but I think we have to, and I think this comes from a strategic planning.
No,
What are we going to do to provide for our students, and how can, again, we leverage our community and say, look, this is a problem everywhere.
We already just leveraged them, I think, pretty big, but anyway. Go ahead.
I'm not talking about financial. I'm talking about the city of Manitowoc. What are you going to do about your crisis of kids? Are you now going to?
Yeah, yeah.
You already don't fund us enough, and now you're going to make us do all the mental health issues within our school because it's more convenient.
and also when we.
Well, the people in human services are, I mean, they're understaffed and overworked. And,
I know.
it's just this society right now.
I
It's just,
understand. I understand
it's just
that,
coming
Carrie.
apart.
I
isn't it?
understand that, but is solving the societal issue by now hiring, and I'm going to exaggerate, 10 more school psychologists so that we're down to a ratio that we can now be providing. And Katie's already said that's not what she's asking for, but now we're going to provide all the diagnostic care to kids.
And I think that's, just to provide some clarification, we do not dabble as educators in any clinical diagnosis of anybody. In
Right.
fact, we consider students who come to us with medical diagnoses of something, we consider that as part of our evaluative information or what services we're providing. But because someone receives an outside clinical diagnosis of anxiety or autism, that is not equivalent to educational services. We do a separate educational evaluation.
Correct.
I like that. I'm glad that you said
We
that.
do a separate educational evaluation because that outside information has to impact the student's ability to perform at school. So we receive a significant amount of students who come with a document from a physician saying, this student has a generalized anxiety disorder and they need this as part of breaking down barriers at school. So we take that into consideration, and sometimes the recommendations are appropriate and they are something that would eliminate a barrier for students.
Well,
sometimes they're not.
And I'm
So we
glad you
have to
said
do our
that
own
too, because
system.
the more we add to that, and I totally agree with, I had a daughter that had some of the best counselors, I swear, in this country at Franklin. And I know some of the counselors here, and the support that she received was amazing. Not my daughter, my grandbaby, sorry. But my daughter obviously had mental health issues herself, due to the fact she did what she did. But the point is, for her to get any type of help order was something that had to go through the county, through the city, this, that, and the other thing. And the more that we add, I'm sure it's not where you're going, but I'm kind of picturing every student having their time on the couch before they get to class, And I'm just like, holy cow, are we getting, So okay, that's strictly for education.
Strictly for education.
Jim, and then Jamie, I know you're waiting as well.
Katie, you had mentioned about, a couple things. One is this in some ways related to response intervention?
Absolutely.
Okay, so response to intervention is saying when we haven't been serving kids academically, there's been a tendency to push kids over to special education. And there we've accounted for high numbers of special for a long time. History, the feds even tried to stop funding, holding back funding that was proved unconstitutional. And it seems like we have category after category of ways to get kids into special education because we're not serving them in the general. So response intervention is making sure that we've done everything possible at tier 1, which is in the general classroom, no supports. The second thing, though, just that little bit of clarification, but then you said remove barriers, because I don't know sometimes if we aren't creating barriers that we're trying to solve, that we add barriers as and all of a sudden, and we get money, but then it's cost of getting the money. So all of a sudden we're having business after business.
So this could actually help with our things.
Well, I'm more with Stacy in terms of
The reimbursement rate for billing is absurd. The amount of money, we would get to even cover.
That's right.
Even to cover it, right? So that's another issue.
Yeah.
Not to mention, You know, it's like every other governmental entity. The amount of work that you have to do to get that money paperwork wise to prove to them that they should be paying you is crazy.
It's sad.
So all I'm saying is I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, but I again, from a board strategic plan, head team, we need to decide what services we're going to provide. And then, we're talking about leveraging the state for certain things, right? We need to leverage our stakeholders in our community to do better and to do different, because we can't do everything.
I agree.
Jamie.
So Katie clarified one point. These are not clinical psychologists. They cannot make medical diagnoses. These are school psychologists who can say if a student qualifies for one of the categories under special education. So that's what they can do. They can also provide interventions or be able to guide us on the intervention. The other thing we have to account for is right now we have 18% special ed count. As we start to see students leave the special education arena because they're qualified to leave, we need a school psychologist to provide that testing. So if the child is currently receiving, let's say, 30 minutes of instruction every quarter, it's pretty difficult to say those 30 minutes are what's keeping that child in special education. But we have to evaluate that. That's the school psychologist's job.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I guess my thoughts are, and again, maybe I'm just, totally missing something here, but, again, just looking at this objectively from an outsider's perspective, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, right? Like schools, what's our function in schools, right? Teach kids how to read, write, and do math, and frankly, we're not even doing that well. And so now we're starting to get out into, all this stuff with psychologists. I'm not saying we don't need it. I'm just trying to understand the need, and I certainly want to support the kids that do need it. I just don't want to be so quick to rushing to this assumption that hiring more psychologists is somehow going to solve our problems.
Right. And what I would say to that is, I think Katie bringing forth one new person based on the numbers that we have, just to complete the evaluations and the thing we're doing now, I still don't think is going to open up for them to even be able to do some of this stuff.
Not to the extent that I think we're envisioning. Right.
Correct.
I think, Matt, you're like every kid sitting on a
Well, right,
before
yeah.
school.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I'm not a
When you
professional.
hear, right, when you hear the word psychologist, I think that's
Right.
the assumption that we make.
Right.
However, to Jamie's point, we
School.
really are evaluating and helping understand
I can see
the educational picture of a student, and really how, as a trained professional, able to look at that whole student
Sure.
through assessment, and they have the ability to even implement or administer assessments that other professionals in our school district don't have. They can do IQ tests, so they really can look at whole child and say, this student has the intellectual ability to perform,
Correct.
but here we are seeing these deficits in companions. So yeah, to your point, that will be, if I were predicting, still 90% of their day will be spent doing the progress monitoring, evaluating, and intervention teaming of teams in their building.
And with that specific direction, I can see.
Jamie and Katie, would you expect the need to go down with our academic performance going up?
No, I think the need is going to go up short term because we're going to be looking at dismissing some students. So that increases the testing capability. And what we're also seeing is in our private and parochial schools, the testing is going up because folks may be looking for support during high stakes testing.
I was, thinking again, long-term versus short.
Long-term, yes, I
Yes.
can see the
And
testing going
I
down.
say that because going back to response intervention is saying things aren't happening in a general classroom that should. There's been pressure a lot in terms of what's done, though they might be compounding the problem.
But in fairness, you're probably looking at a year away from that picture.
It's much more long-term, but
Yeah, and I would say too, one of the interventions, and correct me if I'm wrong, on an IEP can be that they engage in outside services,
See you
correct?
tomorrow.
We
No.
cannot,
Not unless we're gonna pay for them.
we can't,
Okay.
we cannot prescribe anything outside of what we are able to control in our school district, in our building.
Got it.
So we cannot say, you need to go see this, you need to go seek out private counseling. We cannot do that as part of an IEP team. We can't even write regular school counseling services as part of an IEP team.
Okay.
We talk about the supports that are special, what needs specially designed instruction.
Right.
So we wouldn't even say, you're meeting with your school counselor on a regular basis, because that it's not necessarily specially designed instruction. You might make that plan with a student who's struggling with that counselor as a building-based plan, but we would never prescribe something like that as part of an IEP.
What about the suicidal student that goes and meets with the school psychologist on a weekly basis?
That would be a plan that student and their counselor and the availability of someone to meet with them on a regular basis to make sure they're okay. Sometimes.
But it wouldn't be written in a plan.
No, that would be a student is in a bit of a crisis. So now, because we want to love that kiddo up, and
Yeah.
if someone outside has deemed that they're okay to be at school, then we may just as a school team say, we're going to let you have a check-in with your counselor or with the psych who might be available, just to be a person who can really do a quick on the spot. Are you here and okay to learn for today?
Right.
It's not going to be any clinical therapizing or anything like that. It would be a check-in and making sure they're able to access learning and instruction in their classroom for the day. And if they're not, then communicating with families to make that determination and see what's next. And then probably saying to the family, what is your doctor outside said, or,
Right.
without prescribing any of those kinds of
Yeah.
services, just really saying like, have you talked to your physician, or have you talked to your counselor, or your therapist outside? And what are they saying? So being that conduit between school and community too.
Well, do we have a motion and a second to,
Is this a 12-month appointment or is it?
They're on a teacher contract, so 10.
They're on a teacher contract, okay. What's the going rate? What is this, what's the?
I thought I
Mike
said
could probably
the
answer
start?
that better
Yeah.
than I can.
60?
Yeah, we're gonna be somewhere in the 60s, no doubt.
All right.
So do I have a motion?
I'd like a
Motion
Oh,
and a second?
I'll second, yeah.
Okay.
No?
Hey, you can motion as well too.
I don't think I can, as the chair.
I can share some more data, if that's
I
what
don't
the team would
think-
like to see. I can share some additional data. if you'd like.
Right now?
No, I would,
No, like-
I'd probably need a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Well,
So
I
do we
think,
feel like I
I
mean,
think
we
we
don't
should,
have to make a
I
motion.
think we
second.
should make a motion just so the whole board can take this on.
Yeah.
I mean,
We
we're
can
not
bring
the
it to the
final,
board
we're
and
not
pull
the
it out.
final.
I can request to pull it out and have discussion on it first.
Well, actually, this is a voted one, so this would come to the full board.
Right.
Then, and it would be debated on if we
Yeah,
bring it there.
Okay. That would give everybody an opportunity to talk about it.
right, yeah.
Yep.
And I can bring those data snapshots for that discussion.
So we have a motion.
That's
Do you
a
have
good
a
idea.
motion
I'll
and a
second
In a
second?
second.
Okay,
No.
and is there any other further discussion?
No.
I had one other thing, but really, first I can't remember. Okay, so all in favor of forwarding this to the full board, motion by saying aye? Aye, okay, any opposed? Okay,
Thank you very
and
much.
yes, and that would be great if you could just provide some more data.
Yeah, like what he requested. over the last few years to kind of get some numbers and look at needs and things like that.
I can do that. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you for handling our spirited debate.
Yes.
Good conversation. I think there is some confusion and you, again, you hear the term psychologist and think what we
Yeah.
know of outside psychologists. And to
Right.
Jamie's point, it's a very, our educational field is very different than the clinical field. So it's important to make that distinction and good conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Okay, Mike has some information for us, a staffing update.
Yes, thank you. I went on to Weekend yesterday afternoon and looked at all of our vacancies. And Weekend is Wisconsin Educator Career Access Network. And just so you know, Weekend is, I think it's used by all 421 school districts in the state of Wisconsin. Yeah, it's the mechanism where we advertise for all teaching positions and all teachers apply through what we call the Weekend system. It's housed at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So relative to staffing, I'm just going to kind of quickly walk through all of our vacancies, give you some pulse on that, and then we can have discussion relative to the matter with any questions that pop up. So we have one alternative ed teacher at McKinley with a math emphasis. We have mental wellness and safety coordinator, the Michael Morgan position. We have 8 SFA coordinator positions, and we had 15 internal candidates for that. So we have 8 positions. We're interviewing Thursday afternoon. Hopefully we're going to make offers either late this week or early next week. And then of course we're going to end up backfilling those 8 SFA coordinator positions. We have 9 elementary positions ranging anywhere from 5K to grade 5. I mean, it's just a smorgasbord in there. No certain grade level or no certain school really. 1 elementary art teacher, 2 clerical positions, a general office secretary at Lincoln and a principal secretary at Washington. We have 4 vacancies at Lincoln, ELL, English language learners, social studies, science, and English. We have a district-wide special education program support teacher. We have 2 cross-cat special education teachers, 1 elementary and 1 single. And frankly, for a district our size, to only have 2 special ed positions, I think speaks highly. We have 6.
Katie says fingers crossed. She's over here.
Yeah. We have 6 middle school teaching vacancies, an ELA, social studies combo, science, reading, mathematics, and 2 tech ed positions. However, with a little bit of luck, we may bring in 2 tech ed people. And I have to tell you, every discipline, every subject area is more difficult to find today than it was 5 years ago, especially a decade ago. But tech ed are extremely hard to find. Far more vacancies than there are people that are qualified or certified. And if we can fill both of these, it'll be a good day. We also have 2 speech language pathologist positions available. And today, Katie and I sealed the deal with one. It was a good day. We still have 1 to fill. Those are very, very difficult positions to find also. We have a sign language interpreter district-wide. We have 3 PM custodians, a head custodian, 1 maintenance B, 2 special education para positions, 1 at Lincoln and 1 in elementary. Administrators, we have 2 elementary principals, 1 middle school principal, 1 middle school associate principal, Lincoln High School principal, and a central office position as director of educational programs. With that being said, I'm hopeful. I need to talk to Jamie and Jim. I set up a meeting with them tomorrow morning. I'm hopeful that I can make an offer to an elementary principal tomorrow, and maybe as I always say, steal the deal there. And middle school principal situation, we interviewed last week. We had some really good candidates. I'm hopeful to bring closure to the middle school principal position and then involve that person with the associate principal hire at Wilson, if we can do that all in a timely manner. Lincoln High School, principals for high schools, always a difficult find, always a difficult find. The pool of candidates for our middle school principals and elementary principals substantially higher than our high school. But as we always say, it only takes one good one. So let's see what we can do there. And then our director of educational programs, I think we have about 30 candidates. That's a large pool. So we'll see if we can get that going soon too. So that's what it's looking like for staffing today. We're right now, we were holding off. We posted about a week and a half, 10 days ago. We're holding off on making any hires until the referendum passed, just in case we had to go through the not so good process. And now I'm seeing principals emailing me and texting me saying preferred candidate for such and such a position is. So you're going to see on the personnel report coming up on April 26th, you're going to see some new hires coming across your desk. So thoughts, questions?
A lot of specialty positions, it sounds like.
Yeah. Sign language interpreter, that's a specialty. Speech and language, tech ed, cross-cat, ELL at the high school, mental wellness and safety coordinators, another pretty specialty position. And of course, alt ed is always, I would say, a specialty too, because it takes a special educator to be able to relate and work well with some of our at-risk students. Yeah.
Any questions at all about those?
Seems overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
Doing your job.
Hey, Carrie, what are you doing next week? I need a little help.
I'm gonna be in Canada next week. Dealing with the crazy ants.
How do you, I guess, one of the questions we always have is how do you, I know you presented at our last meeting just about kind of about the same places we were last year, but how are you feeling about the candidates that we have that are coming in and just overall the process and how it's going?
Yeah. Well, when I looked at the candidate pools across the board, they're smaller than a decade ago. Obviously, they are, but we have to look at it. We have to look at it like if we can find one good one, we're good to go. So far, I'm really pleased with our speech language pathologist hire today. So is Katie, I believe.
Yeah.
Hey, Katie.
Amazing.
Yeah, our principal interviews have been excellent. We've had some very good competitive candidates, some really good interviews. So I think we feel pretty good about that. So as we move forward here now, I'll have a better pulse on that situation probably in 2 weeks, because I'll be involved in a lot of hiring in the next 2 weeks.
And I guess my only other question is, Jim and Jamie, maybe you could speak to this too, or whoever's been on the principal teams, is how, I'm not saying what, I don't want to know answers, but how are you introducing them to SFA as, a totally new model, and, determining, whether or not that they, feel like they want to be part of kind of that new endeavor?
Well, it's really interesting you asked that, Stacy, because in the interviews, we were asking them typically you've done some research before you come into an interview. So tell us what you know about the Manitowoc Public School District. And they'll tell us whatever they tell us. And then we'll say something like, and how familiar are you with Success for All? And a couple of them had done their homework, and a couple of them hadn't done their homework, But to answer your question, I think more specifically is once we bring somebody on board, then we have to start talking about how we're going to transition them and get them as much up to speed with the other principals, the elementary principals or middle school, depending where we're at. and we'll work on thinking that transition through and making that happen.
Jamie, anything to add, or Jim?
I just have to say, I've been really impressed with the candidates. I mean, we interviewed, I think, 5 for each position, and all 5 had really strong characteristics. So I've been pleased. I think we're gonna do well.
I was not involved in the screening interviews, but in some of the finals, and I was pretty impressed. And again, after you've interviewed a person 2 or 3 times, Jamie and Mike, have a pretty strong feeling in terms of how that interviewing process, whether or not they're somewhat repetitive and fixed, or whether or not you can see just that much more because you're digging down a little bit deeper. And I think they've been able to sort through some people on some of our finalists, but we had a good final interview team, and I think we all felt pretty good.
Katie, were you on the team too? Anything to add about?
No, I think we've all just been listening to your question about SFAs. Right now, we've been listening for people that can be really strong instructional leaders.
Okay.
To lead our teams through this change. And I feel really strongly about our candidate pool for both positions that we interviewed. They all gave great evidence of their strong instructional leadership and how to support teachers and how to lead through change. And I think right now that's what we're listening for.
And nicely reinforced, I was very pleased with the executive committee type people who were involved in terms of how that was reinforced and how the candidates just stepped right up to the plate relative to.
Well, that's exciting,
again,
you guys. I mean,
as Mike had mentioned, some are doing research, others, but there always could be a reason why somebody hasn't. But it was really interesting in terms of some, we were pleased because, because there's fear out there in transitions.
Sure.
And even to the extent that you hear comments about, people are leaving. Sure. To get the pool of candidates that we've received. I'm really.
And then there's people that they're like, oh, sure. Oh, that's great. That's good to know. I think from our perspective that we're getting some candidates and that you guys are excited about these hires and what they potentially can bring to the team. That's excellent.
Kind of relative to that too, because we just talked about SFA. We're in the final stages. We have the contract to attorney. I'll be signing on off that, and hopefully, still within a week potentially, to finish your approval of our proceeding with SFA. So we feel pretty good about how that's coming together.
All right. Anyone?
No, that's good. I love it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thanks, guys. I know it's a crazy time of year for you with interviews, and I know that's one of my least favorite things to do. So being able to do that all day, thank you.
Yeah, and one right after the another. I mean, you guys are like constantly interviewing. It's wild.
Yeah.
And it hasn't even started.
It's been time well spent. So.
Good.
Yeah, I try to inform our principals and impress upon our principals, a better word, is that hiring is the most important thing we do. So it's always put in the time on the front end, because we don't want to put time in on the back end if we don't do our due diligence and get good quality people. And the higher the quality people you bring into your organization, the more your organization thrives and the more it becomes a high performing organization. So it's important that we do our best and we bring in talent.
So people like principals, do you have to take them to lunch? I mean, when we hired at the university system, that was a requirement. We had to take them to lunch. They just give them proper school manners.
I'm hearing that as a directive. Will I start taking people to lunch?
Okay, so the last item on here is the WISE staff update. And remind us all what that is, because I keep saying WISE staff, and that's
it's
WISE dash.
WISE staff, yes, WISE staff. And it's the old 1202, if you ever heard that. And if you have never heard that, that's okay. What it is in our system, and last fall we have Alio, and in our Alio system, all the teachers had their teacher assignment in there. And then it goes into it's exported into the WISE staff report. That's a DPI report. And the DPI WISE staff report, what it does, it matches their license and certification to their teaching assignment. And if there's some glitch or no match, it comes out as an error. So
Oh,
some of you may remember about 2 months ago when Mike Nault reported to you that we only had a couple errors and it was too good to be true. I don't know if you recall that evening. Well, it was too good to be true because about 2 weeks ago, Jennifer, our new HR generalist, was just cleaning up a few things in Y staff on a Saturday afternoon before spring break because we had to hit the submit button on Tuesday. And she texts me and says, I think you better call me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what's this all about? So I give her a quick call and she says, hey, I found the audit report and we have about 30 errors. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Now what those errors are, some of those errors are their teaching assignment wasn't correctly put in the Alio system when it transferred. Some of them, their licenses expired. They had a license, but they let it expire. Another one that comes up is that they're teaching, let's just say they're teaching 5K through grade 5. Special education teacher has students in all grade levels, but they're only certified 5K through grade 3. It comes up as an error. So what we have to do is when that happens is we have to go to work and clean it all up and get everybody licensed properly, obviously. And typically we would have had since last February to do that. Well, so Monday I called DPI, not just recently, it was the Saturday and the Monday following, Monday of spring break, I called DPI. And I asked for an extension because of our situation, our circumstances. And he says, the only time you get an extension is for a tornado or a hurricane or something of that nature. I was like, okay, that's not going to work. No, he said, just get your teaching assignments in properly, get them in right. So we got them all in there correctly. We hit the submit button. And then since then, we've just been working diligently with all these people as far as, okay, here's what you need to do, and here's what you need to do. And I tell you what, the staff has responded very well, very well. I mean, no delays, got right on it. And within by the end of spring break, we had contacted, I think, almost everybody. And we were making good gains, really good gains. And I feel as though we're in a good place right now. Given our circumstances that popped up on us that day. So just wanted to let you know about the Y staff report and what happened. And we're in a good place. We're there.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add?
Motion adjourned.
Although it's not on the agenda, so you can't talk about it anyway, but just.
Oh, yeah.
Motion to
Oh,
adjourn.
we can, I guess. Huh?
Motion to- Second?
Yeah.
Second? Okay. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Good night, everyone.
We're adjourned
Oh, that's some good news
6:37.
there.
Thanks, Katie.
Wow.
Jamie, you want to stay on a minute?
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Katie.
All right, see you tomorrow.